Hello, and welcome back to the final video in this Blender for Game Artists series, where we'll be texturing this Jeep and calling it a day. If you somehow missed the last video, I should mention that the model in its current state with the UVs all ready to go is freely available over on my Patreon. Alright, so let's get started. We've done well to get to this point without using a single add-on, but unfortunately the time has finally come. Normally, I would be the kind of person to show you how to do it yourself, like without an add-on, and then I could show you what the add-on provides. But in this instance, for texturing like this specifically, it's really not worth it. Honestly, all you'd learn is how much of a headache it is, like having to manually connect up all sorts of nodes that you already don't know anything about. We can do without that, and it's all thanks to an add-on called Ucupaint. I wish it was called something I knew how to pronounce, but it is at least completely free and already built in, sort of. We just have to enable it by going to Edit, Preferences, and if you come to the Get Extensions category, search for it, install it, all done. You should see it pop up over here as a sidebar panel. So what this does is it takes the default way that you would texture in Blender with like an insane amount of nodes and just spaghetti lines all over the place, and it just automates everything, simplifies it, basically leaves you with nice channels and layers to use with masking for all children, naughty and nice. Before we hit this button to start creating our material though, the first thing that you're going to want to do is just wipe whatever materials that you already have on the object. So, just whatever you have there, make it go away. And then we'll just create a new one. We could leave it blank and the add-on will make one for us, but we're already here, so why not? So let's press this to get going. We'll leave everything as default since we're doing PBR workflow for this. Click OK, and here we go. So these are the channels that we can paint in, like color, metallic, roughness, normal, and then the layers underneath are where we're going to be doing all the work that feeds into those channels. If you press this little plus icon, you have access to a bunch of stuff here. You can add a new blank image, and this is what you would normally choose when you want to paint like actual brush strokes on your model. Layer groups, very important if you have lots of stuff that you want to keep organized. You can paint on vertex colors, add in a solid color, like a fill layer, basically. And then a bunch of stuff here to do with like default noise generations. You can bake in some fake lighting, which is really nice for hand-painted stuff. These other two options down here for Ambient Occlusion and Edge Detect are real-time generators, but you can bake them down at the end as well, so that's good. And then you just have all of these other common maps that we can bake straight onto the model. We'll cover the most useful of these and also show how masks work, just as we chug along with this tutorial. And the ones I forgot, which is to actually open images that you already have. So while you can texture from any room that you're in, just by changing your mode up here to texture paint mode, or pressing Control Tab if you remember that, we may as well just hop over to the actual texture paint room where it just sticks us in the paint mode and also has the paint version of the UVs on the left. Try to ignore the pink model, that's just because we're in solid mode and we changed our solid mode to look for a texture, of which there is none. So we're going to press N to get our side panel back and also switch over to Material Preview with Z. Let's just chuck in a solid color to begin with, and I'll give it something that resembles a Jeepy kind of color. From here, let's actually jump into the juiciest parts first. So to begin with, let's bake out an ambient occlusion. We could use the real-time one, but I'll just stick with the default baked for now. I'm going to go with 2K for my maps, and I'll switch this over to GPU compute for better speeds. I'm also going to turn these things off just so the bake is a bit faster. Always better to get a rough idea first and then up the quality later if you need it. So click OK on that and we get the AO baked in almost immediately. I think the only way it could have been faster was if it baked before I pressed the button. It's pretty nice. You can change the value here on all layers to adjust the opacity, by the way. I have just made a mistake though, but an intentional one, like as a teaching moment. If you can figure out what it is before I mention it, then you, my friend, are made of the right stuff. It's the wheels. So when you bake an AO on like one whole object like this, you're going to get these sort of contact shadows. So on the wheels themselves, they're really close to the body, so they're getting all of the shadow from that. So if you were to have them spinning around, it would look, weird. It would look wrong. So to fix this, we'll adopt an old school method and just duplicate this Jeep out over here, far away from the other one, and then come into edit mode. Select anything that you want to have its own AO rather than inheriting it from something nearby, and just move it away from the mesh. We could do this on the original mesh as well, but then we'd have to remember to put everything back the way it was, whereas this duplicate, we can just discard it when we're done. Okay, so something like that, and now you can come down here to rebake the ambient occlusion. And also, like, if there was something that you didn't like on the original bake, like if it was too strong or spread too far, you can change some settings here to tweak that, and always, just do a rebake if you need it. I'm just going to leave that all as default and bake again. Now you can see the wheels are all fixed up nicely. And if that wasn't engaging enough for you, another thing that we could do is bake out some bevel normals, and this is basically a magical button that makes all your meshes instantly AAA quality. It's kind of like if we were to go around and like add in actual bevels to our mesh, like on all of the hard angles, except this way we're getting it with a normal map instead. So there's that bake, and everything's kind of been a bit mushed, I guess, a bit sort of smooth, and so for me that's a bit too strong, so I'm going to rebake this, and I'll halve this value for the radius by just adding a divide by 2 on the end here, and then hitting enter. And there we go. You should be able to see like a massive difference here. Like this part here is a completely sharp edge, and then you stick on that bevel normal and boom, suddenly Naughty Dog are knocking on your door begging you to come work for them. There are some drawbacks to this though. It's usually not perfect in all places, and without more advanced tricks that go like out of the scope of this tutorial, you also can't have different parts of the mesh have a different radius of normal beveling. But from a quick glance, it does seem like it's done a really good job, and I'm happy to keep that. Let's show you some masking next. So right now we have a solid color and it's just blasted on everything. And we could apply a mask onto this color itself, but one thing I think you should learn first is the power of masking within layer groups. So we can add a layer group and call it something sensible, and then we'll enable the mask option here. And you can have it start on white or black. 2K is the texture that we're going for, and I wish it would remember this so that I don't have to change it every time I add in a new layer. I usually prefer to leave the mask on black, meaning visually nothing actually changes, because then I can just add the mask information myself. Up to you though, whatever you prefer. You can select either the folder, or if you click this image here, it shows you that you have selected the mask. So with the mask selected, I'm going to come into edit mode and basically just start selecting everything that I want to be in this layer group that we've made. And I'm just using the L key as well to select entire elements that can basically speed this whole thing up. Something like that. And you may have noticed that I've only selected these parts of one of the wheels, and that's because these share the same UVs, so we only need to mask one of them. Now we're going to pop ourselves back into texture paint mode. And if you see this button here, the paint mask, if you select that, it will show you what you've selected on your mesh. So we can come here to our fill tool, and then we want either a pure white or a pure black color, depending on how you set your mask up to begin with. So I'll just click and that will fill that color in. And at the moment it looks like nothing happened. But if I were to move this solid color layer inside this group, you can see that now this color is the only thing being applied to the area that we specified. And we can always come back if we wanted, just select the mask, select some stuff in edit mode, go back to texture paint mode, get the fill bucket tool and click. All done. If you ignore the little end cap that I missed there. So So the nice thing about having an entire folder in here is that everything we add into this is going to be automatically masked. So for example, you can load up some random grunge texture here, which will be included in the free Patreon download, by the way. And so you see all of that is now masked to our layer group. And if you remember before, I was talking about how we have these channels that we can paint in. So if we wanted, we could take this grunge and instead of having it affect the color in the channel layer, we can just have it affect the roughness instead. And there we are. Bevel, edge, normals, and grungy roughness. This is shaping up to be a portfolio piece if I ever saw one. It is a bit much for me though, so you can either tone down the opacity of like the entire layer, or if you prefer your main layers to have, you know, like maximum opacity, you can always turn down the mix amount here instead. This just means if we were to add masks and things onto this grunge image, we can control the strength separately instead of all of them being toned down by, you know, like the master value. Another thing that everyone does with grunge textures is to use them to create some sort of color variation. So what we can do here is create a new solid color, and I'm just going to make it a little bit lighter and a slightly different hue than what we had on the Jeep. And I'll press OK. And I'll just call this variant, and then we can add a mask. And the one we want is open available images as mask, because we've already loaded the grunge texture into Blender, so we can now just reference it whenever we want. Click OK on that. It is in the exact same place as the smoothness as well, which means we could have just done this on one layer, but who knows, maybe you'll change your mind later and mess with the scaling on the color variation or on the roughness, and you know, they will independently kind of have their own scales. So that's enough about layer groups. Let's just get one more base color in, not in a layer group, just as a recap on how to work with this. So make a solid color layer, call it something that makes sense. Make sure it's outside of our layer group for the body just by moving it down. Go into edit mode, select the bits you want. Add a mask on the solid color, choose new image mask. Again, I'll go with black. Hop back into texture paint mode, make sure the paint mask is enabled, and then just fill it with white. And yeah, I'm just going to speed ahead now so that all of the base colors are done. Alright, so I've just gone ahead and created a bunch of solid color layers. These are not in layer groups, it's just basic fill color with a mask for the geometry where I want it. It's a pretty simple setup. So we've learned that we can affect other channels, like how we put the noise map into the roughness channel, and on a similar note, we can do the same with normal maps. We can even paint our own. So let's add a new image layer, and instead of color, change this to normal. I'll go 2K again, and we'll leave it as the bump map. I know it might make more sense to change this to a normal map because we want to paint a normal map, but if you choose that, then you'll have to paint with normal map colors, whereas a bump map just wants grayscale values and it would then convert it into a normal map for you. I'll press OK on that, and I'll move it underneath the bake layers that we have here. I'll isolate the jerry can by selecting its faces and pressing Shift H. This is optional, by the way, you don't have to hide anything if you don't want to. And now if I switch into texture paint mode and just start going at it, you can see that we can paint normals, which is very cool. You'll also notice that I'm painting in red here, but it's really only getting the brightness value from this color. For clarity's sake, I'll switch this so we have the black as primary and the white as secondary. And then as you're painting, just press X to switch the colors. Pretty cool. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to come up here to my stroke. I'll change it from space to line. Then I'll click here, and if you hold Alt, it will lock it to a direction. So just drag it down and click again. If you did isolate the mesh in edit mode with Shift H like I did, you can press Alt H to bring everything back. I'll also go down to the wheels and add in some little details here. So I'll change my stroke back from line to space. And I'm just going to eyeball this, but the plan is to add some big bolts onto this. Something like that. You can also change the power of this, either by changing, the actual sort of color values of the color that you're painting, or holding Shift and F, which is easier. So, you know, like this is a great way to add in like all sorts of little details, and it saves you having to do like a sculpt pass. I don't even know what this is, but you know, it is certainly there. I did that. In terms of extra details we can add in, decals are also supported, which is really cool. But if you were to go to create a new layer and look around for eternity, you'll notice that there isn't an obvious option here to do anything with decals. I really think there should be, because I think a lot of people miss this feature. But the way that it works is you can open any image with the usual options for adding an image, and then just change its vector to a decal. One easier way though, for me at least, and I only just learned this recently from Passive Star, who you should absolutely follow if you're looking to learn Blender, is if you were to just drag out an area here and change this to the file browser. If you just find the decal that you want, you can just right click, come down to the Ucupaint menu, and then you have this open image as decal layer or a mask or whatever else. So we're just going to go with a simple decal layer here. Just press OK, and now this has come in. She is a little shy though, hiding underneath and also rotated weirdly for some reason. As an aside, if you added this at the bottom of your layer stack, let me just move all this down to show you, then you might think that nothing's displaying. Decals don't render on top of other layers, so the layer order, like with regular layers, is still important. So let's just get that back up. From here, you can click on the Select Decal Object button, which drops us into object mode and selects the decal. Now you can use regular move and rotate tools to get it where you want it. I'm also going to hold the control key while rotating in this view to make sure that this is actually centered properly, because if you remember, we are using symmetrical UVs here. So if I were to put this at a weird angle or offset the image, it's going to bake out all weird. You can also scale it, of course. And now if I click back on the body here, on the invasion star layer, we want to get rid of the black because there isn't any alpha on this image, and because it is just a black background, we can change the blending mode from mix to just lighten or screen or any other mode that will ignore black. And that's how you add in a decal. The last thing I want to cover quickly before we talk about how to bake all of this stuff down into actual usable textures is, if you're used to working with something like Substance Painter, then you'll already understand the power of fill layers and masks. And it's the same deal here. You usually want to start with a fill layer, and for this I'll showcase it with just a basic color, but you could also use an image texture. We do want to add a mask, but no worries if you forget to add it in this step. So click OK, and there's our color, just covering everything to be expected. We do want to mask this with the same geometry that we masked the tires, but there's no need for us to make a whole other layer group and set that whole thing up again, or even to do a new geometry mask. Instead, what we can do with the layer selected is just come down here to the mask and add one. And then the option we want is to open available image as a mask. And the reason we want this option is because all of the masks that we have made before, like the one we used to show the tire color on the tires, exist as actual images. And now this new color layer is masked with the same mask that we're using for the tires. That makes sense. And then from here, we can come back down to the mask area and we can select another mask. And for this one, I'll choose Cavity and just bake that out. I realize I keep saying this, but it does look like nothing has happened. And that's just because the cavity is a little too open-ended at the moment. So we need a way to tweak the values of it. We can do that by coming down to where we have the cavity mask. And if you click on this little cog icon, you'll get some options. Some of them are like modifiers basically. And the one we want is ramp. And now we have access to a black and white gradient slider. So just tweak that until it looks a bit more like something that isn't terrible. You don't have to stop there either. You can always add more masks as well, whether it be a procedural noise or some other grunge type thing that you just, just to kind of like break this whole thing up. I'm going to leave it here just for the sake of the tutorial though, but please, by all means, experiment with it. Have fun, and if you do happen to actually have reached this point and have made something, please show me. I would love to see it. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, it is time for the final part, which is to actually bake out these textures into something that you can use in a game engine or whatever you want. And it's also time to say goodbye to our duplicate object over here, because when it comes to doing the actual bakes, the decal that we have can get a bit confused because it doesn't exist on the other one. So sometimes it can just render out as not existing. So say bye-bye to that and thank you for your service. When you're ready, just come up to this cog icon in the top and select Bake All Channels. And then of course, for hopefully the final time, we'll change the texture resolution over to 2K. And I don't know if it's just me, but I prefer to change the margin from adjacent faces to extend. This, in my opinion, is just much more common and it helps to avoid artifacting on some seam edges. You can set the actual pixel amount to be whatever you want. It won't actually overlap other UVs, it will stop whenever it meets something. And don't worry if you have no idea what any of this means, it is a little out of scope for this as an intro to texturing. So press OK and give that a little moment. I think for this one it took about 12 seconds, which is not bad for a bunch of 2K maps. And so we do have all of our textures now, which we can see by coming over to our UV paint area here. And you see we have all of these masks and the raw layers from when we were doing the texturing, but we also have the final bakes, and these are the ones that you can save out. If we come back to the menu over here, you can see that the Use Baked button is highlighted, and if we were to just click on that, it puts us back to where we were before. So if you wanted to keep texturing and then rebake and tweak and texture and just bake again, you have the freedom to do that. Lastly, and this is mostly applicable if you're exporting to game engines, but we have this window down here called Custom Bake Targets. And what this allows you to do is to set up RGBA channels for textures to pack into. So if you're using Unity on URP, for example, you would want your metallic map as the metallic textures in R, G, and B, and then the roughness or smoothness, as Unity calls it, as the alpha. And if we just do another bake to all channels again, and then come and check out the new image we just made, you can see that it does contain alpha, which will be for the smoothness. And if you did need to invert any of these, which I'm pretty sure you do for Unity, there is also the option there. And there we go. I mean, that is now legitimately everything done. The tutorial is finished. I thank you so much for watching. I can't imagine many people have actually made it this far. All of the source files and textures are available over on my Patreon. It's a free download. You don't have to actually pay any money, but if you want to support the channel, that would be, massively appreciated. But obviously, I leave that up to you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.